Hi, thank you for joining us for the webinar today. We are excited to have Dodie Merritt present the fourth webinar in her PET series. As you can see, we are offering 20% off all of the PETS products, excluding the sets, and you just need to use the code PETS3 when checking out to receive that discount. The handouts will be at the bottom of the page, at the bottom of the screen for the entire webinar. And if you have any questions during the webinar, put them in the chat feature, and Dodie will get to those as soon as she can. Thank you, and we will go ahead and let Dodie get started.
Emily, if I'm supposed to get started, I don't have anything on my screen.
You can't see the PowerPoint right now?
No, all I have is a black screen. Now I have share my screen.
Okay, hold on. Can you see it now?
Nope, I have a black screen, and what I have is that little thing in the middle that's supposed to usually go around that shows you you're getting some activity. Should I click sync?
I'm not sure. Are you still not seeing it?
Nope. Should I try to sign in again or something?
Yeah, go ahead and do that. We'll see if that helps.
All right. Sorry to all the participants out there. So I'm just going to shut down this. Something else is something. Oh.
Okay, Dodie, you need to turn your microphone back on.
Great.
There, now I can hear
Okay.
you. Can you see the...
Yep, I can see the PowerPoint, and you can hear me. That's good because I've been talking.
Okay, well, we'll let you go ahead and go then.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Critical and Creative Thinking Skills for 21st Century Primary Minds. This is the fourth in the PET series, and today we're going to be focusing on Yolanda the Yarnspinner. as ever, I'm welcoming you to Crystal Pond Woods, those of you that have been here before, and those of you who are here today for the first time. As you can see, this is actually put together by a group of students that live down in, or teachers that live in Springfield, Georgia, whose students are working with the thinking specialists in Crystal Pond Woods. And they put this up on the wall so that their students would always have an idea of where they were and what they were doing. And all the different characters have a place in which they live. And today, obviously, over here, that's Yolanda's home, where we're going to be spending some time today. Primary education thinking skills focuses on divergent thinking, and one of the thinking specialists is Isabel the Inventor, and her best friend, with whom we're going to be working today, Yolanda the Yarnspinner. There are two convergent thinkers. We have Dudley the Detective, and we have Sybil the Scientist. Now, those of you that haven't been here before, there are some past webinars that focus on the skills that Dudley the Detective and Sybil the Scientist bring to the table for students, as well as Isabel the Inventor. Next time, we'll be working with Max the Magician, who's our visual-spatial specialist, and the last one will focus on our evaluative thinker, Jordan the Judge. And this is today's star, yes. This is in your handout packet, and you'll notice a little yellow star down there at the bottom left-hand corner. Anytime you see a slide that has a yellow star on it like that, it means that what you see on that particular slide is in the handout packet. So there's a family album in the handout packet, as there has been in the past, and this is so that you can hand this out to students, and helps them stay familiar with the 6 thinking specialists. Someone asked me actually at a conference recently why some of these are all in black and white and not colored. Part of that is so that the students can do it themselves, and that gets them more engaged. It gives them a contact with the animals themselves. Part of it's also because when we were drawing some of these to begin with, they were just done in black and white, and that's the way we printed them. But I like the fact that while I like having colored posters, I also like the fact that the students can actually interact and use some of their own taste in coloring these. If you're new to us, these are the materials from which some of these ideas come. There are 3 levels. There's level 1, 2, and 3. We focus primarily in these webinars on the materials from the Red Book, which is level 1, which also has an updated Spanish edition. There are discs with each of the books, and any of the materials that I talk about that are not necessarily from samples from other teachers and other schools, anything we talk about is actually in these books, and you can print it out. All right, so here we go. Yolanda the Yarnspinner, who uses her imagination to weave wonderful stories. Her best friend, Isabel the Inventor, invents new things, but really Yolanda is our creative writer. She really focuses on the way to say things really, really well. In her hands right there, she has her word bank. That's where she collects all kinds of great words that she just loves to use whenever she's writing or whenever she's speaking. She really is the one that focuses on language as much as possible. The red box over there in the lower right-hand corner reflects the page in the book on which you can find what the focus is for each slide, if in fact you're using those materials. All right. I see a note there that says that the Isabel webinar is not available. Sharon, we will check into that. It should be posted, but I will check with the folks back at the home office about that. And Emily, if you're listening, notice that the Isabel webinar apparently isn't available. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Sharon. We talked last time during the Isabel webinar about the elements of creative or productive thinking. We talked about fluency, and that's the ability to come up with lots of ideas. And that certainly is something that Yolanda looks into. She really wants to have lots and lots of ways in which she can express herself. But she also wants different ways to express herself. It's like having a page that has how many different ways can you express said, as you know, I said something, and how often do kids just always write I said it, he said it, she said it. How many different ways can we express that verbalization? And having that kind of flexibility is something that Yolanda is really interested in. She also likes to come up with ways of saying things that are not the norm, so that she can create different kinds of pictures in your mind that maybe no one has created there before. So she's always looking for an original way of expressing her ideas and her thoughts. And a big part of Yolanda's creativity comes with elaboration. She really wants to enrich what she's saying with as much detail as possible. And this is probably one of the pieces that is most critical for our young students, is how do they say something in a way that is complete and not just the bare minimum. So Yolanda really works with them at fleshing out the ways in which they express themselves. For those of you that are interested in using the PETS materials to help identify the strengths of some of your students, there are behavioral checklists focusing on being yarn spinners. As you can see on pages 131, 31, they're also on your handout. What they focus on primarily are those 4 things that we talked about: whether or not you can come up with lots of ideas, fluency; whether or not you use colorful words to bring out certain emotions or different pictures in one's mind. That's that flexibility, being able to do things and look at things in different ways. Whether you can offer a unique or uncommon response to something, that originality piece. Then, of course, using phrases, or I even just like the thought of using just sort of unusual and not just one, but several ways of saying something, so that we bring in that elaboration part. We're looking for students that have an unusual, mature sense of humor expressed through their language. They have often have an advanced vocabulary. And being able to retain information, what they've learned as far as skills and writing skills, is certainly something that shows a strength in this particular area. And those are the characteristics or the behaviors that we would be looking for when we're identifying our strong writers, our talented writers. And those checklists can help you track that kind of behaviors in your classroom, so you can use that either as part of a formalized identification program, or even just to talk to parents during different, the parent meetings that you have, or perhaps you just want to talk to the administrative team in your school about a child that has some unusual strengths, and this gives you a way of tracking that, not just saying, well, this is how I feel about it. All of the characters are generally introduced with a story, and in this case, Yolanda's story actually connects with Dudley's story right at the beginning. And those of you who are familiar with Dudley know that Dudley is a detective, and when he got up to get dressed one day, he discovered that his badge was missing, and the mystery he had to solve was who had taken his badge. Well, in Yolanda's story, her friend Rascal Raccoon comes to her and says he has a great story to tell at the fire that night in the woods when they're all getting together around the campfire, and he has a great story to tell. And it turns out the story he wants to tell actually is the fact that he actually saw Rosalind Robin fly in the window and take Dudley's badge. So he knew about what was going on. Problem is he wants to tell it in a way that's really going to captivate his audience, and he just knows that he's just isn't prepared to do that. So this story focuses on Rascal working with Yolanda to come up with some really interesting ways, unusual ways, some great language, so that he can hold the attention of his audience at the campfire. Each of the thinking specialists, as we know, has a memory trigger, something that the students can make so that they can, in fact, so it reminds them of the skills that they're supposed to be using when they are pursuing whatever activity is you have going on in your classroom. And in Yolanda's case, not surprisingly, it is a bookmark. And as you can see in the picture there, those are some bookmarks that were made by some students up in New Hampshire. The yarn reflects the fact that spinning yarns or telling stories is Yolanda's strength. And of course, all those threads that she wants to weave together when she's making a really elaborate tapestry, story that she can share with people. There are 8 pieces that are hung there to reflect her 8 legs, because it's only the top part of her body in the picture. All right. And here are some students that made those up in New Hampshire, thought they were pretty cool. They're all ready to use them. In your packet, however, what I've added is an adaptation of this bookmark from a wonderful teacher in Texas. And she took the bookmark and she actually added some information to it so that the students, if they were actually had it on their desk while they were writing, this would remind them what was important. What were the things that Yolanda feels are important? She says, a good storyteller uses words in creative ways to make colorful, entertaining pictures in our minds. They love to play with words. They're looking for just the right word so that they can create those, mental pictures. And they also use words. Some words rhyme, some words imitate sounds, and some begin with the same sound. These are actually points that are all made in Yolanda's story. But Beverly pulled them out and put them right on the bookmark, which I thought was a pretty cool idea. And then by punching holes in the bottom, you can just loop some yarn through. You don't have to worry about glue. And then that way, notice with just 4 pieces of yarn, you end up still with 8 legs at the bottom. So that one, as you can see with the yellow star, is in your packet if you want to use those. So an initial activity, in one of the first activities, whole group activities that Yolanda presents to the class is what she calls her skeletal sentences. And this is where you start with some cards that you would put up on your Elmo, however you project things in your classroom. And the idea is, what can they add to? This is pretty basic. My mother reads. And obviously they're on different cards so that they can be moved. And students can add and build on them and make the sentence as long as possible. And it gets to be kind of a fun activity because you keep adding and you keep adding and you keep adding. And it's wonderful to see how long and complex the words can get. It's a little harder for me to do that here on a PowerPoint. So I just added one word, voraciously. My mother reads voraciously. And one of the things that I've also added, which is in your packet, because it's not in our books, is these certificates that I love to give out to my students when they used a word that was really unusual. Wow, that's a fantabulous word you used. Add it to your word bank. And then the word gets written down there, and they get to collect these certificates that are special from Yolanda. Following that whole group activity is some seat work, challenge pages we call them. They can either be something that is however you want to use it in your classroom. I usually left them. The classroom teacher would have the students do these in between my visits. And in this case, with super sentences, the idea is that these are words that Yolanda has collected. And the first thing she needs to do is to divide them into words that she wants to keep in her treasure box or words that she wants to just recycle or get rid of. And so students have to go through the words and decide which ones they really like. And I haven't done all of them, but this gives you an idea, drawing lines to the recycle bin for the ones that are going to be repurposed for something else, perhaps. And then the red line, those are the blue lines. And then the red lines show you the words that I want to save and put in my treasure chest to use as part of my writing process. So then down below, they take some of those words that they have wanted to put in their treasure chest, and they have to create a colorful, lively sentence or sentences using some of those words, and then adding some other ones. So in this case, the crisp leaves and crystal pondwoods glowed in the moonlight, frosted with snowflake glitter. Using, let me see, I should have been frosted with fabulous snowflake glitter. I think I should have used my fabulous word there as well. The crisp is used, the glitter is used. All right. So it's, again, to encourage them, what can they write, what can they do, using some words, giving them something to springboard from to start with. Now this is this group in New Hampshire from whom, unfortunately, I get a lot of pictures, and you'll notice that they're out on a hike in the woods, and they're all carrying, clipboards in their hands. All right. The reason they're carrying those clipboards is because this is a sensory hike, and this teacher talked to them about Yolanda before they went on this hike, and talked to them about it's sort of a combination of their science unit and then their writing unit, because what she wanted them to do as they went out and looked at things was to consider what they were looking at from the perspective of the 5 senses, and then she wanted them to put down words that would go along with each sense relative to what they were looking at. So this was the chart she gave them, and actually this is in your handout packet. These were Yolanda's sensory words, and you can see down there in the left right-hand corner, we have a young girl who's actually writing down some of the words that she wants to remember. What are some things that you see? What would be some good words for describing what you see? Good words for describing what you hear, smell. I will say over and over again that while the activities in the pet series are fun to do and standalone, just as standalone activities, you'll get the biggest value out of them when you actually can tie them over into your core curriculum, so that students can understand the kind of thinking they're doing, and they see that these thinking specialists and the kind of thinking they do really support the way in which they learn in the classroom. This teacher was actually doing a pumpkin dissection in her classroom. This is a first grade classroom, by the way. And she projected her sensory chart, Yolanda's sensory chart, up on the board there. And then as the students were dissecting their pumpkin, if they came up with a word that they felt would be a really great touch word, like squishy, like what, they would call it out, and this teacher would write them up on the board. Things that you hear, or a deep sound, or a hollow, empty sound. The smell was kind of tangy. So they're getting familiar with the fact that there are different ways of saying the same thing, and I think that's really important for students to see it. She also has these big posters, that particular teacher, of the different thinking specialists that she puts up whenever an activity relates to that particular thinking specialist. So again, there's that visual connection made for the students. Once they were done and they collected all their words, the students then made a series of poems. When autumn falls, I see gray rocks. I hear blowing wind. I smell fresh pine. I taste sour apples. I feel cold wind. So they had to use their sensory words while they were actually writing these poems. I see soft rock. I can't imagine what soft rocks are, but maybe they were more organic looking and not sharp, sharp and edgy. I hear windy trees. I smell pointy pine needles. I taste sweet wind. Ooh. I feel fluffy, and I can't tell what the last one actually is. All right. So here's another one. And when she was all done with these, and when they were done with these, of course, the best thing you can do, it makes a great bulletin board. But what's wonderful is they knew that Yolanda was right there with them, encouraging them to use all that different language. This teacher has another page that she uses, My Stupendous Yolanda Words, all about whatever it is they're studying. The students can collect words for any kind of writing project they'll be doing. They have a notebook. Some of you have seen these before. They're all about thinking binders, and each of the thinking specialists has a section in that binder. So that's where they would keep this kind of material. So all of these Yolanda pages would go into the Yolanda section of the binder. I think it's a great way to organize stuff, and for the kids to see how this builds over time. So another Yolanda activity looks at this idea of good news, bad news. And in this case, what we see is there's some good news. Mary has a new storybook that's cause and effect in writing. Bad news, some pages are missing. Good news, Yolanda knows this story. But the bad news, Yolanda forgot the ending. The good news, Mary can read the ending in the book. Those pages are there. And certainly we know that there are some books out there that follow the same format for students. They're familiar with the format. So then the challenge page for them is that they have to write and draw their own. Fortunately, I don't have any student samples of these to share with you today. That's a typical Yolanda activity. Probably one of the most challenging, but it can be one of the most fun of her activities is her radical riddles activity. This one is generally used, I've used it in small group with students, and those are the students that have already shown a strength as far as their writing and language skills are concerned. But there's no reason why it could not be done in a regular classroom. Working in groups would be my suggestion. Now I want you, while we're going through this, I want you to be doing it on your own as well, because I certainly learned, after I'd done it a couple times, that practicing makes all the difference. So the first thing that you have to do on this one is you have to think of an animal. All right, so think of an animal right now. Get a piece of paper, write it down in front of you. Think of an animal, any kind of an animal. All right. In my case, I'm going to be using a pig. All right. Now, okay, Now that you've got your animal, boy, time is just flying here, all right? What you need to do now is brainstorm a list of one-syllable words that go with this animal. One-syllable words that go with this animal. I have found that even in small group, it is often a good idea to choose the same animal. So it gives you better management. If every child's doing a different animal, I have found that that is more challenging to manage. So agree on the animal. Later they can go back and choose a different animal if they want to, but at least for the first time through, do the same animal. All right, so in this case I have ham and I have snout. All right. Number 3, you're going to cross out the beginning sound of each of these words. All right, so whatever words, one-syllable word you came out with. All right, what I want you to do is cross off that initial sound. Step 4, think of a long word that begins with what is left of each one-syllable word. So I've got am and I have out. Now for am, I'm going to put ambulance. And with students, what I've often out, I'm going to put outlaw. Now with some students, I've also said, okay, let's choose one of those words, and they were like, let's say we decided to go with am, and then for 4 we brainstormed just words that began with am. Either actual am or sounds has that same sound. All right. Step 5, what we're going to do is we're going to add back the first sound of the one-syllable word to the long word. So now we have a hambulance, and we have a snoutlaw. Those are going to become our answers down here in number 6 to our riddles. So we have hambulance is going to be the answer to my first riddle. All right. Now I have to write the riddle. How do sick pigs get to the hospital? In a hambulance. What about snoutlaw? Who took all the yummy desserts when no one was watching? A snoutlaw. You know, sometimes they work real well, sometimes they don't, but it's very interesting to watch how students work with this. And in fact, here are some student samples. I mean, they can be, we're talking first graders. Sometimes they work real well. Sometimes we need to try again. Anyhow, look at, what do you call a doghouse designer? A architect. That's pretty cool. These are my students, actually. Why do pigs go to the North Pole? Oh, that should be, why do pigs, not two pigs, sorry. To live in pigloos. What do you call rabbits from outer space? Cottontailians. And these are by first graders from a place on the outskirts of Crystal Pond Woods, a place called Crystal Lake, Illinois. So that's how that works, and there's a copy of Radical Riddles in your packet. If you have one of the earlier versions of our book, this has been updated a little bit so that I think it works more smoothly for students, and it's clear as to what they need to do. All right. That blue 106 means that this is actually a level 3 book, level 3 activity called Cool Skadoodles, and it is a case of when you doodle and sketch, and you come up with these things that they're just kind of strange-looking pictures. The idea is to get students not so much at this point to come up with lots of ideas, but to come up with a good elaborative caption for each of these pictures. So for instance, not just that there's a worm, going in a hole, but a golf ball leaving a trail into the hole. Or down at number 3, which is one of my favorites, usually, people will say, oh, it's the moon over the water, or it's a ball in the water. Well, how can we make that more elaborate? It's the door on top of a submarine coming out of the water in a bathtub. Immediately the picture that we begin to see is much fuller, there's much more depth. So the idea is to get students to begin to recognize that the more they add, the more detail they put in, the more interesting their writing becomes, and the better mental pictures are created. Now this is a mistake. It says the convergent analytical thinking cube, and I apologize for that. The one in your packet is correct, and I somehow overlooked this because the PETS cube that you would want to look at would obviously be the divergent one with lots of different kinds of questions that stimulate students to answer more than yes or no. Again, adding elaboration to their thoughts as they share what they've learned about any of the books they're reading. This is actually in the yellow book or the kindergarten book, where we want to encourage teachers to ask the kinds of questions that will set the stage for meeting the thinking specialists when they get to level 1 or in first grade. So there are cubes for convergent thinking, divergent thinking, visual thinking, and evaluative thinking available for you in the kindergarten book. These actually fold up into cubes, as you can see here. I actually put these on the sides of big boxes. But having cubes is really great for students, I think, because it sort of changes that habituation of always the same kind of approach, and it becomes kinesthetic for those kids that want to hold something. So these were just some gift boxes that I picked up at a local store, and then I just put those questions on the sides of the boxes. And it can be used with any of the trade books that students are reading when you're sitting around doing story time. I think I say over and over again, when you can connect the thinking specialist to what's going on in the core curriculum, it makes the biggest difference for students. In this picture right here, this teacher was sharing with students about writing paragraphs, that there need to be a topic sentence. This is first grade. There need to be details and there need to be a closing. And because it was about language and writing and using colorful words, she took her picture of Yolanda and stuck it right up there on the board. It's not strictly a PETS activity, but the same thinking strategies that they've been learning with Yolanda apply to this writing activity, and it makes that connection for students. With that in mind, in your packet there is this page, so you can begin to look at your curriculum and analyze it. So in this case, if you're brainstorming lists of sensory words, what are the thinking skills that you're using? Well, there's fluency, aha. There's analysis, there's elaboration. So clearly the analysis applies, it's a Sybil activity. So if they know about Sybil and the way in which she takes things apart, then they'll be better at analyzing the different kinds of experiences they're having, what they're looking at. Is it a touch word? Is it a C word? And better at classifying. That fluency, coming up with lots of ideas, is a direct spin-off from Isabel, who wants to come up with lots of ideas. And elaboration is Yolanda. So right there, they have three of those thinking specialists supporting them whenever you're brainstorming, in this case, lists of sensory words. The signpost that goes with divergent thinking, the more ideas the better. There's your fluency. Changing categories is great. Flexibility. Wild and zany ideas are welcome. That's that originality. It's important to respect the ideas of others. And combining ideas is cool. That's that elaboration, piggybacking, adding more and more detail. This is actually one of the signposts that gets put up at level 3 in the woods so that people can find their way to becoming better and better divergent creative thinkers. Data tells a story, just very quickly, that using this program has certainly helped in an Arkansas district that shared their data with me in increasing the identification of gifted Hispanic students. All right, and so it was a way of reaching students that are not normally reached through some of the more formalized gifted identification programs. And another program was done on the achievement levels of students, and there were actually, it was determined that the growth of first graders in the PETS program showed significant growth in certain areas, math, science, language, arts, social studies, and in reasoning. So, and in the spring testing, they outperformed in all areas except grade 2 reasoning and grade 3 language arts, comparing students that were receiving the program with students who were not receiving the program. So we are seeing that this program does make a concrete difference and quantitative difference in terms of, in addition to qualitative. So just remember, metacognition rules. And we're here at question time. So, anyone have some questions before we sign off for the day? And I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. Well, I'm not seeing a whole lot of typing going on, so I'm going to assume that this just answered every question that you had. And if not, if you think of something later, there is a PEPS website, so you can post your questions there. And if not, you can always just email them to Pieces of Learning. If for any reason you don't think they're being, you don't get attention soon enough on that, then just email them to Pieces of Learning, and they will email them to me, and I will take care of them the best I can. All right. That said, thanks for joining us today. All right, and be sure to check in with us on January 23rd, when we will be working with Max the Magician. And happy Thanksgiving to all of you.